I basically have boiled this down to 3 questions about the Great Lockdown. First question is, can the internet handle it? And the answer is no, actually. Those of you who know your military history know that the internet was designed from the beginning as a military network, and it was designed to provide redundancy in the case of a nuclear attack. So let's say a bomb fell on Chicago, the internet signal would have no problem hopping around it via other cities on its way from coast to coast or something. So for that reason, there's a lot of redundancy built into the trunk lines, the main pipes of the internet. There's another reason that Europe is different from the US, and that is in the US, most of us have cable. We get our internet over the cable TV lines, and in Europe, it's mostly DSL, which is over the phone lines, not nearly as capacious. There is, however, an explanation for why you're sometimes getting error messages when you're using Zoom. When you have cable, what you're paying for is the download speed. See, cable TV was designed to bring 500 channels of video into your house. It was never designed to carry video out of your house, because who would ever do that, right? So when you sign up for internet, you see this one figure. This is from the Comcast webpage. You get 200 megabits per second down. Forget what that means. It's just like miles per hour. Downstream, meaning into your house, but upstream, out of your house, it's a far, far lower number. These are the averages right here for the US. So we average about 64 megabits per second down into our homes, but only a fraction of that out, because who would ever care? Why would we ever need to send video out of our homes? Ha, ha, ha. Well, here we are in the pandemic. The solution, if you're starting to get those error messages during a video chat, is just to turn off the video. You get something like this. You see just, the other people see just your name, but they hear you just fine. And meanwhile, you don't have to get bumped off the call completely. The second question is it possible to have contact tracing and privacy? Contact tracing doesn't get a lot of play in the American news cycle, but if you're an epidemiologist, you talk about not just finding vaccine and social distancing and wearing masks, but you also talk about contact tracing. And the idea here is for each person who's confirmed infected with a bug, you ask that person, you interview that person, where have you been in the last 2 weeks and who have you been in contact with? And the idea is if you can figure out manually who's been exposed, then you can let those people know they've been exposed. You're much more likely to let the country get back to its normal business if you can focus on people in terms of getting tested or getting isolated, have been exposed, and to stop them from continuing to infect other people. So contact tracing during SARS and Ebola was a big deal, and it really helped to stop those pandemics. So there's this idea, our phones all have Bluetooth in them that is a 30-foot wireless invisible signal. Why can't we use our phones to trace the people we've exposed? Then it wouldn't matter that you don't know the people's names, right? And that's exactly what some countries have been doing in South Korea and Singapore. There are some problems with this, though. First of all, Apple phones, iPhones, and Android phones speak 2 different dialects of Bluetooth, so they can't communicate in this way. Also, in the countries that have done this, you need to keep the app open and running all the time for it to communicate with other phones, and it kills your battery. It's just constantly saying, here's me, here's me, here's me, and it just eats up your battery. But there's an even bigger problem. I don't know if you can guess what it is. It's that it is a massive invasion of your privacy. So that's where the Apple Google thing comes in. These 2 companies, you understand, are arch rivals, iPhone versus Android. They hate each other. They've sued each other. They have top secrets from each other. But in March, they sat down and agreed to work on this problem together to see if there's such a way as to do contact tracing that is 100% optional and 100% anonymous. When you buy raffle tickets, the organizers keep a copy so that they can confirm that you have the matching ticket. So basically what happens is at the end of every day, your phone, that's the ticket on the bottom, compares itself to the list of winning tickets, the infected people, and sees if there's a match. The government doesn't do this. Apple doesn't do this. Google doesn't do this. Your phone does this. So your phone is the only source of the information that you've been exposed. And you get a little pop-up message that says, alert, you've been exposed. You might want to get tested or consider quarantining. Contact your state health agency. That's another important point. Neither Apple nor Google has written an app for this. They want the state health authorities to create these apps. Apple and Google don't want the data. They don't have the data. They have nothing to do with this. These programs are supposed to be run by the state health agencies. So, and it's not the federal government either. So the only critique about this is that it's gone too far in providing in protecting our privacy and opting in. I've heard people say it's going to fail because you have to have 60% population participation in order to wipe out the pandemic. And you know Americans as well as I do. You know, people are terrified of privacy invasions. So I would argue, however, you know what? If this thing saves one life, it's worth doing. If even a few people opt into the program and alert other people that they've been infected and those people's lives are saved, then it's been a good thing. I don't really see the objection. I do, however, think that Apple and Google have a tough job ahead convincing people that it's okay, that their privacy is protected. There have been white papers and experts and security people who've come in and inspected this program and confirmed that it's totally private, totally optional. But even still, I hear people say, you know, wouldn't catch me with that thing. So the whole thing is rolling out in two phases. Apple and Google have already put the Bluetooth adaptation into the software. The state public health organizations are now welcome to write apps that do this. Later in the summer, they intend to build the tracking into the OS itself, so you won't need the state app to get the alerts that you've been exposed. The alert will say, by the way, you've been exposed. Click here to download your state's app, and it'll tell you what to do from here. The big problem is the states so far have their hands full with the second rise of the COVID infections, and they're not really jumping on the stick to write these apps. So that's another reason that it's really a public relations issue more than a technology one. Europe jumped on the Apple Google program right away. Their apps are rolled out in Italy and Germany. Of course, Europe, man. And the third and final question is the internet a necessity like electricity or water, especially during the lockdown? Now, obviously not everybody in the United States has broadband. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, that's the government agency in charge of internet, estimates that 7% of Americans, that's 21 million, don't have broadband internet. That's too bad, but it's not terrible. However, Broadband Now, which is a coalition of broadband providers, thinks the number is double that. And Microsoft and Penn State have both done studies that conclude that the number of people who don't have access to broadband or whose broadband is too slow to matter, like you couldn't get a video chat going, is as high as 50% of the American population. First of all, Microsoft is measuring underserved and unserved. That is, people with no internet and people with terrible internet. The FCC also doesn't count people or households. It's counting by census tracts. These are these enormous blocks of population in rural countries that can be hundreds of miles wide. In a dense city like New York, and can be one city block. But the point is, if even one person has broadband in that census tract, everyone there is marked as yes, they have internet. That's how the FCC does it. And they know it's stupid. They've agreed it's stupid. They've asked Congress for money to provide them with more accurate counting, and Congress hasn't come up with the money so far. Also, the FCC relies on the word of the Verizons and AT&Ts. And if the FCC says, hey, what about this neighborhood in Maine? And the Comcast says, oh yeah, we're going to have that up and running in 2 weeks. The FCC goes, check, that area has broadband, even if they never follow up. The problem is that the FCC has no ability to count or measure by itself. It relies on the telecom companies. And also, it's important to note that a huge number of people without broadband in this country, maybe even more than people who don't have access to it, just can't afford it. We have this program for low-income Americans that provides a subsidy to them so that they can get online. Guess how much it is? $9.25 a month. You tell me where you can get high-speed internet for $9 a month. I'll sign up. Another big difference is the definition of high speed varies. These bars at the top here show the average Americans' download and upload speeds. You can compare that to what the FCC defines as broadband. That's the middle two bars. And what the Connect America Fund, which is a low-income American program run by the FCC, they call it 10 megabits per second. They call that high-speed internet. It's a joke. It's not. Meanwhile, just for perspective, I've added a fourth set of bars to this graph. This shows you the maximum you can sign up for in America. So now compare what the FCC calls high speed. It's really slow. Meanwhile, when your public library is closed, if that's where you used to get your Wi-Fi, that's gone. In some places like New York, they kept the Wi-Fi going. But I interviewed this one woman in Oregon who has to. She writes for the New York Times. She can't get internet where she lives. So she used to go to the library. Those are closed. So she has to park outside the Taco Bell to do her work. She doesn't feel great about it. And in many cities around the country, they're packing school buses full of portable Wi-Fi hotspots and parking by low-income apartment complexes just so kids can get their schoolwork done. So is the internet a necessity? Well, the court has said that it is. And the government's job is to equip us. A, can the internet hold up under the pandemic? And the answer is largely yes. B, is it possible to have contact tracing in private? But people need to be aware of what this Apple Google program can do. And C, is the internet considered a necessity by our governments? And the answer is sort of.